Yo, what is up? Fantasy Fling here. Looking back at week 13, we are doing a review. GPPs, Millie Maker review, a little bit of MME strategy up top, DFS Pros, and then also going to hop into a little cash lineup review as well. All right, guys. So we can't do a week 13 review. We can't do a weekend review for NFL without some big wins. And oh my gosh, there are big wins everywhere. I mean, it was really hard to choose which ones to showcase. So first off, I'm gonna go with Frankimus Prime 4 winning the Minimax. We say it time and time again. The Minimax winning this is the equivalent of winning the Millie Maker. When we actually jump into the winning Millie Maker lineup, you will see that the Minimax is a higher score because most weeks you're going to have a higher score that wins this contest because there's more entrants. So shout out to Frankimus Prime. Little sweat. It was very close, but I think he had the Kenneth Walker Seattle combo that really brought it home and was able to hold it down, and no one was chasing him down with the low scoring slate. This guy, I believe, in second place, I was kind of watching this. The guy who had second place had the same lineup, more or less, or the last two pieces. So it would have had to have been third place to chase him down, and that would have pretty much been the only way he would have been chased down. And then my boy here, Sliders, 20K over on FanDuel, 100K Sunday NFL Rush. Kind of same thing. I think the situation here was he was able to hold off second place because second place had Vidal. He did not have Vidal. And luckily, Jarrett Patterson got some run in that blowout there. Sliders, we've reviewed his MME strategy, his wins many times on the show. One of the best things about Sliders, he's an incredible DFS player, but he's also extremely humble. So, that's rare these days. And Slider is one of the OGs. DFS Army Hall of Famer. Definitely, I mean, he may have more swag bags than anyone at DFS Army at this point, too. Shout out to him. And then moving on here, Magic 11. Thank you. Third week of Dom Station. Dom Station is DFS Army's optimizer, the domination station, which you see here that we use to attack tournaments, large field GPPs. So he was able to get a Fantasy World Championship ticket, 75K. I believe that's a live final. Incredible. Really good day. And look, he did very well in the Millie Maker as well. So we'll have to hop in that and maybe look a little bit of his MME strategy. That wasn't even on my radar when I hopped on this show. So I'm curious how high he placed. Let's see. Before we look at the what won the Millie, Magic 30th place. Okay. We'll have to look at some of his lineups real quick since he took that down. So I'm just going to tell you, the guy that won the Millie Maker this week, definitely just pushing buttons. So, I normally don't rag on whoever wins the Millie Maker because you put a lineup together that won a large field GPP, you won $1 million. I will say after looking at his lineups, his or her lineups, B Mosley 24, that there's not a lot that I think you can really gain from this because you will notice this lineup is unstacked. And all the lineups were unstacked. There was no quarterback stacked. And there was correlation in this lineup. But the one thing, when I looked at the exposures, I'm like, it wasn't really that he or she was super over the field on a lot of the top plays. He or she actually had very flat exposures, which is why you got one lineup here at first place, one in 400th. And then it just goes on and on from there. So yeah, a few lineups in 400 and then the next lineup in 2000. And I don't know. It's really hard to kind of nail down like how would this be a repeatable process. When we look at exposures, and we'll dissect the lineup actually first, but when we do look at exposures, we'll see that it's there are some things to be taken from here, but I'm not sure like how repeatable this process would be, unless of course you get another ugly slate like the one that we got. So just looking at the lineup that took it down. This was a Jacoby Brissett naked stack or naked build rather, but it did have several stacks in the lineup. So I'm actually one of those people where I'm like totally okay with naked builds if there's correlation in the lineup, and that is exactly what this lineup had. I'm just curious as to how it got there. Maybe he or she used an optimizer and it just really like boosted up, like it was like a sim boost or like a stack boost. So you would get naked builds, but you would get correlation in the lineups. Now, if that is what happened, then kudos to B Mosley 24. But so we had a naked Brissett, but then it was Vidal plus Bowers. So there was one stack there, right? That's a game stack, little ping pong stack. And then there's Nico Collins plus Schultz. And this is what gets me. To play Nico and Schultz, then both to get there, but to not have CJ Stroud, that's a little surprising. And there were multiple lineups like this. Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, right? I think overall it's kind of negative EV to play that way, but certainly in this build, this lineup got there. And Adonai Mitchell and Bijan Robinson. So again, there was a lot of correlation in the lineup for sure. And in that sense, it's a good lineup. I don't know how repeatable it is though. So that is basically the takeaway I would have there. Overall, not too chalky, 120%. That's kind of where we're at. And, so there were good plays here. Like we loved Bijan Robinson. He was one of my highest exposed guys. Same with Kamani Vidal. I think Nico Collins was kind of bailed out. The play was bailed out a little bit by Sauce Gardner getting hurt. I don't know that Nico has the day that he has if Sauce Gardner plays and doesn't leave right away. Tetero McMillan, yeah, anytime you get a guy in a low ownership who's a good player and they're going to be throwing a lot as Carolina was, I like that one. I like the Adonai Mitchell play. Just across the board, I had a lot of both Mechie and Adonai Mitchell, so I like that. I like Bowers. I loved Bowers in this spot. New offensive coordinator. You think maybe they're going to target him. Maybe they're going to get, post coach getting fired bump. So I loved the Bowers play. I thought at 5,800 they were going to force feed him, and and he did well. And then Seattle against Minnesota against a third string quarterback, rookie. I liked that play as well. Overall, I did like the lineup. What I'll say though, like I was kind of alluded to a little while ago, there's not a lot of consistency in the lineups though, because then you go, you get Jacoby Brissett here, and he's naked, but you do have a K-Dot bring back. And then you get Justin Herbert with Vidal. Okay. But then Josh Allen's naked. And it's really just the secondary stacks. So I'm just very curious if there was like a stack boost that maybe, like the stack boost was like 20%. Like it was high to get a lot of these secondary correlations without having the quarterback stacked. But I was surprised when I was scrolling down here. I thought, maybe if you just use a sim boost, but you would get some stacks with your quarterback. And really, I was, I scrolled pretty far down here and I didn't see any. Now, this one is Bijan and John Mechie. Again, Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz. That was a constant. Tyrod, and that's what's kind of surprising. Both Mechie and Adonai Mitchell were popping on our projection model. So how do we get Tyrod here without Mechie or Adonai, especially because they were so cheap? This one, no Trevor Lawrence. So, yeah. And then when we look at exposures here, that was what was kind of surprising. Like, he wasn't like, 60% like Nico Collins, right? Like just over the field on Nico. Over the field on Higgins, not incredibly high. Where was he at tight end? He had a good amount of Schultz, and just even with the field with Schultz. And then we go to running backs, like, yeah, 22% Bijan, but not a ton. Like, nothing was really incredibly high here. And then I'm curious, 14% Stroud, but I didn't see Stroud like with Nico Collins, with Dalton Schultz. So just kind of crazy to me. I will say, and my first inclination when I see like a naked, build, but then I see correlation, I'm like, oh, I respect that. And then I start going through the builds and I'm just like, okay, I'm trying to understand how this came together. How is this repeatable? And then it's, I look at exposures and whatnot. And the one thing that I will say that I liked with this lineup is on this kind of slate, when we looked at the domination station for, well, this isn't actually it. This one is when we looked at the main slate and, we start seeing like all these low totals across the board and not like a ton of game environments. I could see the naked quarterback build. I could see that in that regard. Or at the very most, you're doing +1. Like you're not going crazy with game stacks. And I can also see the flat exposures. Like the highest guy, 26% Nico Collins. No one really above 26%. And then, just like a lot of flat exposures, right? So that is the one takeaway I would have from this. The way this lineup was built, like if I was building, for this slate, I think not being crazy exposed to a lot of different, players, like having 40% here, 30% here, 40% here. I think this was kind of the slate to have more flat exposures. And that is the one thing I like about what B. Mosley really did with this lineup. So, want to look at a couple MME DFS Pro strategies. Now, DeColts is a DFS Pro. I'm pretty sure DeColts has won the Millie Maker before. Definitely won the Millie Maker before. Not sure if it was the $20 Millie Maker, but I think maybe has. And DeColts is DFS Pro that I have a lot of respect for. So I wanted to look at what he did with his strategy. Now, kind of as I was talking about a minute ago, he, top 14 here, just outside the top 15. Positive ROI on the day, 35 hundo, plus 35 hundo. It's nice to not lose 35 hundo, which is what you can do in the Millie Maker if you play, super exploitative and you don't get the slate right. It's very easy to just not win any money, first or last mentality. But this was a Tyrod double stack. And with Breece Hall was one of them. Bijan and Achane. So this was basically a Tyrod +2 with a Bijan bring back. Looking like another secondary stack here, Achane and Olave in that New Orleans and Miami game. And then, also Juwan Johnson. So stacked that game up pretty good. He had Seattle D, had Alec Pierce, low ownership. Alec Pierce, I like that. This lineup was a really good lineup. Just didn't get there, right? Close enough, but did not get there. And it was a low scoring week. And that was one of the crazy things about the Millie Maker. When we look at the score, like barely over 200 points, we hadn't seen that since week 1. But looks like he had up top here some Tyrod doubles. This one with Mechie and Adonai Mitchell. Let's take a look at his exposures. So double the field on Puka, and that's kind of crazy to me. And that's the sign of a good player that's clearly has the right settings, optimization settings to be able to have double the field on a guy like Puka and still place top 15 in the Millie Maker, large field GPP. Clearly says that he's not taking too many hard stands. And when you look at his exposures, you can see that here, right? A couple spots, double the field on Gadsden. Over on Brees, but not a lot. A little over on Achane. So just it seems like a couple spots at the receiving position, one being Puka Nacua, the other being Gadsden, and then at running back, also like being over the field in some spots. We talk about this a lot. Like running back, chalk fails less at running back than it does at wide receiver. And I'm talking like good chalk. Like literally teams could just double team a wide receiver like JSN and just be like, we're taking him out of the game today. He's not going to beat us today. You just don't see that nearly as much at running back. Unless you get like an extreme talent like Jonathan Taylor and they're like, he is too good. We will not let him beat us. We are going to stack the box and then we're going to make them throw. But for the most part, especially when you get like running backs in a good matchup, like, we had with Achane, like they just don't fail to the extreme degree that like wide receivers will. Like JSN being 9K and getting like 3 points, like that is just crazy. Typically, when you see that with a running back, when you see a running back in a smash spot and they absolutely fail, it's almost always because they got hurt. Like for them to fail that hard to get 3 points, especially in a PPR format like DraftKings, these guys are getting dump offs. It's really hard for them to fail like a JSN, like a Puka would. So the point I'm trying to make is I think it makes more sense to want to go over on these running backs and not go too crazy with the wide receivers. And that's something that I see time and time again. Really doesn't look like any big stands at quarterback. CJ Stroud a little bit over the field, little under on Jacoby Brissett. At quarterback, really just flat. Two guys over 10%. Seattle D or San Francisco D went way over there. That was supposed to be a windy, cold game. Shedeur Sanders takes sacks. I understand that spot going over there. At running back, obviously, was just heavy on Brees, Achane, Vidal, and Kenneth Walker. Basically the same crop of guys that we were on at DFS Army. And then, Bijan was even filled weight there. Good amount of Kyle Pitts as well. But taking stands for sure, fading Khalil Shakir, taking stands for sure in a few spots, but not taking so many stands, just being flat in a lot of spots. So again, that kind of goes back to what I was saying. The fact that he was able to place a lineup in the top 15, but also like get double the field on Puka, and Puka essentially fails. I think that he failed for his salary anyway. I think that goes to show that he plays a smart way in that regard. And that's why he's one of the best. I want to look at Giant Squid real quick. Or not Giant Squid. Utica. So it's always interesting to see Utica. I've been looking at Utica's exposures a lot. More so double tight end. I very much think Utica lets it ride in the flex. From what I've been seeing, I counted not as many double tight end builds, especially here near the top, but I counted all 150 of his lineups here, and like half of them were double tight end. So he clearly is not being very restrictive at tight end. And I wanted to see this slate in relation to the other slates because this slate was I think, more clearly a 3 running back slate than it has been with double tight end in the past. So that was something I wanted to look at. Still a lot of double tight end. I still think, that's clearly a way that Utica likes to play, but definitely mixing in more running back as well. So he was on Tyler Shough here. Tyler Shough double with Olave and Vele. Let's see. This one was a Stroud lineup, Stroud single. So, yeah, we'll see him. He'll have a combo of +1, +2. And you'll even get some +3 lineups as well. This was a Tyrod double, Josh Allen double, which is not something you see a whole lot these days. Nico double, Stafford double with Parkinson, Jacoby Brissett with Trey McBride, Geno double with Genty being in there. So let's look at his exposures real fast. Don't want to spend too much time on this. Want to see what Magic did real fast. So he had a lot of Olave, and I'm guessing he had a good amount of Shough too. So, yeah, 13% Vele, 44% Olave. So that would probably mean he had a good amount of Shough and 23%. So that was clearly a stack that he really liked. A lot of leverage there. And, God, these guys were also low owned that, yeah, you would think he's doing that, and then he's playing a lot of chalk, right? He's playing JSN, double the field on JSN. He's playing a lot of Puka, Adnai. So, yeah, he definitely went in a few spots. Obviously was heavy on Saints, but then was wanting to eat that wide receiver value. Both of these guys were in such good spots, and yet they failed. Tilting. A little bit of Ellick. He had DK, Van Jefferson, not much Van Jefferson. How much Cam Ward did he have? Guessing he probably had about 10%. 12%. So 12% Cam, 15% Josh Allen, 11% Stroud, 23% Shough. Those were his guys. 7% Tyrod. So not crazy high on Tyrod. And then, yeah, look at running back Walker. So eating the chalk, Walker, Bijan, I love these exposures. A lot of Achane. A lot of Brees. I'm guessing there was probably and Genty too. I loved the Genty play. I just thought kind of the same thing with Brock Bowers. They just fired their offense coordinator. I would think that they would want to force the ball to Genty. And they were running good with him early, and then they just stopped. And then they tried to go back to it later, and it just wasn't there anymore. So I understand the process, though, for that play. And I just want to check real quick, go back to lineups. I'm guessing, yeah, a lot of the Shough lineups. Or no. No, he just had a lot of Brees Hall. That was the wrong game. Yeah, and he had a good amount of Bijan, so probably had some ping pong stacks with Brees Hall there. But let's just take a quick gander at Magic's lineups. I mean, I have a good idea because I know what the domination station was spitting out. So this was a Tyrod double. These are Tyrod doubles. The thing is like, it wasn't getting a ton of Tyrod unless you started, like if you were forcing in the Bijans and the JSNs, in the Pukas. Like if you were forcing exposure, then you would have got to more Tyrod. It wasn't naturally spitting out a bunch of Tyrod. So I'm curious if that was just his stance or not. Let's look at his exposures. So 44% Tyrod, but he also only played 60 lineups. And I say only because, it is 150 max. So it makes more sense the fewer lineups you're playing, the more exposure to have to these players. He clearly went Tyrod, Bryce, and Darnold. And I can tell you for a fact, the DS was not pushing a ton of Bryce Young. And it wasn't pushing a ton of Tyrod either. So he would have had to have got to that on his own in this situation, which makes sense. But it was also a week to just get weird with it. But, with your quarterback sacks. And that's why we saw Utica playing Shuck. We saw Tyrod. And naked Brissett, a little bit of everything. More of the same at running back. Nothing too crazy at wide receiver. All the guys. The DS was pushing Mechie and Adonai Mitchell low. So that's one thing. If you sim boosted enough because you were getting Mechie and Adonai Mitchell, it might have definitely forced Tyrod if you set like 2, quarterback +2. Might have got it. But anyways, let's move it along to the cash lineup review portion of the show. Good week in cash. I won 80% of my head-to-heads in cash. It's funny because I feel like it was a good process week in cash and it was a good results week, but I did not love the run out with some of the players I got. I mean, it was a very low scoring week for cash, like 110 to win 80% of my head-to-heads with 110, but the winning Millie Maker lineup was like 205, right? So not really surprising that, when we look at that, like it was a lower scoring week. And some of the plays were right. Like I faded the CJ Stroud chalk, and that is really what led me to the cash line. CJ Stroud, he's not a cash quarterback. I don't know why he was chalk. It didn't make sense. He doesn't have the floor to be a cash quarterback. So I'd gone with Jacoby Brissett, who had a good floor, and it was a good matchup against Tampa Bay. He got there. Achane, he was a core for me. This was too good of a spot. 22 points, not going to win the tournament. But, I mean, most of the time it's not going to win a tournament. A low-scoring week like this week, it will, for sure. But regardless, like in cash, this is a great score. That's why you play a guy like Achane, because he has that 22-point floor. That's exactly his floor. That's why we played him. I liked Brees at 6K. Thought he had a good matchup as well against Atlanta. Puka, this was a smash spot. I ended up choosing Puka over JSN. I thought it was close. That actually led me to cashing because in 9K, the 13 he got versus what JSN got. I'm guessing what JSN got, like 5 points, 6 points. I feel like it was less than that. What did he get here? 4 points. Jesus. So, yeah, Puka over JSN was probably the decision to lead me to cash line. That and Jacoby Brissett over CJ Stroud. I had Waddle as a core. This was a spot I thought he would have done a lot better. I liked Mechie better than Adonai Mitchell just based on just what a bonehead Adonai Mitchell has been. He's very high variance. I thought Mechie brought a safer floor. And this is kind of one of those things where process over results. Mechie had like 3 big drops, and one of them he would have had a chance for to make a play, break one tackle, and it to be a touchdown. Mechie should have had well over 10 points. He could have hit 20. But he had the drop, so he didn't get there. Gunnar Helm, he was a pay down that I liked, even with Chig playing. He had already been involved. And then Kenneth Walker's a guy that I got on late. I liked Vidal more, but the difference was salary-wise, it just made more sense for Walker. And then when I looked at the domination station on Sunday morning, kind of take a look at this here. I believe when we look at the prop projection, no prop. There we go. Kenneth Walker, and of course I got, you know, all my things in here. Kenneth Walker, he had like a 13.2 projection, and Kamani Vidal had a 13.9. So it was so close. But when you look at the fantasy points per dollar play, you look at the extra ownership, it was enough that at that point that I was comfortable getting to Kenneth Walker and spending that salary elsewhere. And that kind of, I believe, was the money that I needed for Waddle. You know, we look at my cheat sheet here. Pretty much all my plays that I was on, I had Allen and Brissett as the top guys, but I liked Brissett a little bit more just with the price difference, and he ended up being my cash game quarterback. Bijan, nailed that one. Achane had a core, nailed that one. Really did well with the running backs. I had JSN and Puka. They were both in great spots. Ended up going with Puka, as you see. And he didn't have as bad of a day as JSN did, and that's kind of the difference maker. Olave would have been the other choice. Olave would have been a better choice over Waddle based on the results. But, you know, I consider both of them as good plays. Mechie certainly did enough. Gunnar Helm was the pay down. And then, you know, we have our pay down defense as well. So some misses, definitely more hits than not. But a few more weeks of this thing, 4 more to be exact. And, of course, we will try to keep it going. But that's going to wrap it up for this Week 13 review. Again, maybe I didn't mention this before, but code CYBER25. It gives you 20% off a VIP subscription if you want to join DFS Army. And this gets you 25% off today only, Monday only. So I hope you're watching this today. If not, hit me up in the comments and I'll get you another promo code. Won't be as good, but you can join the wall of winners here potentially and get access to the cheat sheet, the domination station, you know, our VIP only videos, all of that for a fraction of the price of the other guys. So CYBER25, that will be in the video description. And if you like these breakdowns, let me know. Hit that like button. Let me know how Week 13 went for you. I know we had a lot of smashes, DFS Army, so hopefully you did as well. We'll see y'all next time.